and welcome. I am Sarah Snell Cook, as always, your host here at the Credit Union Connection. I was joined recently by Terry Seitz, who's a co-founder as well as COO, CMO, a bunch of letters at a group called the Nuance Collective, working on brand and marketing for credit unions. And so we discussed the importance of brand and how to make that happen to differentiate yourself, because that's truly the only way credit unions are going to be able to grab the attention of the younger generation or anybody for that matter, as well as marketing and all kinds of stuff to deal with your external communications to your members. So, with that in mind, why don't we go ahead and connect with Terry? Hello and welcome, everyone. I am Sarah Snell Cook, your host here at the Credit Union Connection. I am joined today by Terry Seitz. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And he is the partner COO at a company called the Nuance Collective. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and the collective.
Excellent. Again, thank you for having me. Terry Seitz, partner, chief operating officer at the Nuance Collective. We are a brand consultancy / advertising agency, depending on the how you want to define ourselves. But that's basically what we do. And we're part provocation. We're sort of a unique band of merry provocateurs who are very much about helping brands create and drive enterprise value. And that sounds like a lot of marketing jargon. And so let me translate and distill that, crystallize that down. As you and I were talking sort of off screen about maybe I'm going to jump around. What would I tell my 20-year-old self, right? One of the interesting things about me and my career, which has spanned 20, 25 years in the marketing business, is a re-anchoring on what our remit is, what we do for a living. When I first started in the advertising business in New York a couple of decades ago, we fashioned ourselves as commercial artists. So the agency world was populated with copywriters and designers and photographers and actors and producers and social commentators and all of these brilliant folks who were much more on the creative side of life. And they made advertising. And that was their sort of way to make a living, but indulge in their passions, their subject matter expertise. Those were the days when it was like you didn't have to really measure anything or be held accountable for anything, right? It was the John Wanamaker, 50% of my ad budget is wasted. I just don't know which 50%. That existed well into my early career, but in the last 2 decades, it's changed, right? With the advent of attribution and marketing mix models and digital marketing basically forced us and the tectonic plates underneath us to change. And now we're going to measure everything because we can. And so the remit or the role of a marketer or an advertiser, be it in a credit union, be it at an agency, be it in a consultancy, any of the folks that we consider within our discipline, I think it's changed from being a commercial artist to a mad scientist, which is a fascinating career arc and retrospective for me, but also I think the discipline as a whole. And what I mean by that is, as a mad scientist, there's a formal approach to how we go about our jobs. It's much more systemic. We come up with hypotheses, we test those hypotheses, we confirm and analyze those hypotheses, we course correct, optimize, and then communicate them out. It's a much more rigorous discipline than what existed 20, 25 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean we've starched out the creativity in what we all do, because I think there's some alchemy in what a scientist in his or her lab works with. And the alchemy, which goes back to this notion of quote unquote being mad, is what we are all trying to do is search for some sort of truth, right? Science, not to go X-Files, but science is about the search for truth, that hypothesis, the debunking of, or the confirmation or the affirmation of. And that is a wonderful thing. The challenge that we all have, to get a little philosophical, is that Sarah, you, I, and the billions of people around the world are by nature illogical, non-binary, and irrational in how we make decisions, and particularly purchase decisions. Which brings me back to the whole beginning part of my diatribe, so forgive me, which is our remit in marketing is not about being commercial artists, but driving enterprise value for our organizations, right? So for credit unions and for all of us, it's driving growth, driving profit, the margin associated with profit, pricing power, and risk optimization. It like that's our job. Our job is not moving pixels and coming up with pithy taglines and newsletter content. Yes, those are all inputs.
That's the best part, man.
It is the best part, but like
Love
we
it.
often forget, and I have forgotten at various points in my 20-year career that folks, what we are in the business of doing in marketing is to drive enterprise value. And for me, it's like a huge unlock, which is if we're not doing those things consciously and systematically planning against those things, then we're not doing our jobs. And so one of the things I would tell my 20-year-old self is realize why you're in the business. And that is to drive profit and margin and growth and pricing power and optimizing against risk and future cash flows. That's why we're in the business, folks. So I'm off my soapbox, but that's who I
I
am.
think we're done. That's
We're
it.
done. No,
See ya.
we're done. But it's amazing how often people forget why we're doing this because we're, living in the frying pan. We have our to-do lists, and every once in a while, it's important to take 3 steps back. As my team teases me about my phrases, taking steps back and going, okay, let's realize again why we're doing this and how we're helping our clients. And that's what my agency does. We are all about provocation in service of driving enterprise value, and that's about not resting on the status quo of things, which goes back to this notion of the search for truth in a mad scientist. One of the things that you and I were talking offline about, and I think one of the reasons, hopefully, why you have me as a wonderful guest, is this notion of the truth in the credit union industry right now. And that is, I believe, and I think you agree, I hope you agree, if not, we can debate it, that there is this idea of a sea of sameness with brands and what they stand for and what credit unions stand for, that is something to consider and be very weary of. We have this notion at the agency, and the notion is there's an aversion to risk that exists for many brands, and what that's leading to is an inversion to risk. We are basically bankrupting our brands by not standing for something because we all stand in the credit union industry for the exact same things. So what I mean by that is we have a bunch of proprietary AI tools, which I think we're going to talk about the notion of AI in a couple of minutes. But we have a bunch of really interesting AI tools that try and understand how a brand and the resonance of that brand exists out in the ether, both what you as a credit union are communicating and then what's being communicated back to you and summarized back to you. And what we have found by doing 60, 80 of audits across credit unions across the country, right? So from Kentucky to North Dakota to California, Texas, everywhere in between, different sizes, different attachments to different industry verticals, is the following. Everybody's talking about community. Everybody's talking about membership. Everybody's talking about a parity of products and services and rates. Everybody talks about some amorphous idea of financial well-being. And a lot of us are talking about us and not the members and not them. And so we're not standing out. And to take this, and you quoted it in your PR piece a couple of days ago, where you said only 35% of Americans know what a credit union does. And that's because when we communicate, it's being forgotten and ignored because either we're all saying the same things or we're not differentiated enough against the competitive set in a local community who are saying things louder with more weight and media dollars behind them. Now, my last point on this is not just like marketing theory or academics for the sake of that. There is a real bottom line business drag and lag on many of us living in this sea of quote unquote sameness from a brand perspective. There's a study done by Karen Essen Fields, who works for a research company called Amplified. It's connected to another entity called Eat Big Fish and Adam Morgan. And they came out with a seminal, sobering indictment of the cost of a sea of sameness. They call it dull, creative, and media and marketing, but assume it's a proxy for a sea of sameness. It costs $200 billion for companies that have undifferentiated, lackluster, dull creative and media every year, or it would cost them $200 billion to, in incremental dollars, to achieve the same results from a enterprise value creation perspective as it does brands and campaigns that are not dull, that are not the same, that are differentiated, that live in people's minds. That is a staggering amount of money. And it goes back to this notion of an aversion to risk is an inversion to risk. We are wasting inefficiently much of our media marketing, creative resources, FTEs, investments, because we've decided to be safe than to be the same.
Can I just, are you ready for me to?
I'm ready, Sarah. I'm ready. I'm so sorry. Yes, of course I'm ready.
No, I totally, and that's part of what I talked about a week or two
Yeah.
ago on branding about differentiation and really your rates anybody can match, your products pretty much anybody can match. Your differentiation is your brand, and how many blue logos or first communities or whatever type of credit union it is name out there that are exactly the same. And that's just talking about brand identity. That's not even going into what brand really is, meaning like your search for truth, like you said, scientists do, and we're the mad scientists now. So, talk a little bit more about a brand's truth.
I think a brand's truth is, again, going back to a little bit of the theory and the fundamentals of marketing, members or prospects, consumers have a very real set of needs. They are functional needs auto auto and mortgage and checking and savings. And those are things that are about enabling them to progress and live their life. Very functional things. But there's also sort of emotional needs. What those functional things do ultimately impact and influence the emotional needs of those members. The truth is marrying or triangulating those two things with a unique set of benefits that a credit union can actually provide to them. So it isn't, again, just advertising or marketing. We have X rate or X product or service. You need to go, why and what does that matter? E.g., the walking in the shoes of your prospective members or your members to understand the bigger emotional picture of how they fit into their lives. There is a famous TED Talk guy named Simon Sinek. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And his whole theory is this notion of people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that goes to the sort of emotional need state. That to me is such a wonderful sense. Now, he bases his theory on people make purchase decisions first and foremost through the limbic part of one's brain, e.g., the sort of the emotional side, and only rationalize those purchase decisions in the neocortex after, right? So it's this notion of emotions, not logic, drive decisions. Therefore, don't just lead with products and services and rates, but why you are putting them out there and communicating them, and what is the larger emotional benefit that they provide your members. And that's such a critical pivot to think about. But again, going back to the sea of sameness, we seem to operate in the safe space of we'll just communicate these five products and services and then wonder why there's not as much uptick. And the scary thing, but it's also an opportunistic thing, is if you think about the credit union space and the financial services space writ large, it is not a fast moving space in terms of people adopting and changing their perceptions and behaviors on the products and services that we ultimately provide members, right? If you think about, and I'm going to quote some stuff from Bankrate and Zebra, It takes 17 years for people to switch their primary checking and savings account. It takes 3 years for people to switch their primary credit card. Almost a third never do. It takes, or the average auto loan term is about 5 to 6 years, right? You can go on and on. Mortgages, people take 2 to 3 out. Their lifetime average home ownership is about 8 years. So I say all of this to say, if we exist in the sea of sameness and don't differentiate, given the slow stagnation behavior and perception moves and actions of members, we are DOA. We will never win at that game of resonance and to your point, differentiation. And that has a chilling effect on lifetime value. That has a chilling effect on future cash flows for a credit union. And so if you believe Simon, to go back to the beginning, and that emotions, not logic, drive purchase decisions, then it stands to reason you need to be different to stoke someone's emotion such that you can get into their consideration set accordingly.
Yes. Thank you. No, I think credit unions feel that the business that they do is so serious. They want to exude confidence out of every pore of their being. But confidence and the seriousness of their business doesn't mean they that you blend into the background because you're just like everybody else trying to do put those points out there. As you said, members buy a car because they are driving home, see a flashy red car in a lot, and they're like, I'm just gonna go buy it. That happens. And but the marketing never reflects, almost never, the feelings because of the seriousness and having to be stable for the member when the member is not stable. None of us are because they're making decisions a lot of times emotionally, but we don't, credit unions very often don't take advantage of that
Yeah.
because they're either one scared to because nobody else is doing it. That's a big thing for credit unions. But the second reason why that is because, oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought.
No, but Sarah, you raise a really interesting and I think opportunity. So I just spent the last 12 minutes indicting the industry, and I certainly don't mean to do that. Again, it's this search for truth and provocating towards where I think opportunity space is. And the fact that credit unions, by and large, are so embedded into the fabric of a community or a company slash industry vertical is untapped. If we think about we think about regional and super regional and national banks, says guy who used to work at Visa for almost 13 years, they are faceless organizations who really don't care about the individual in Laredo or Bismarck or St. Louis, right? You are just an account or a social security number to them. That is not the ethos and the DNA of most credit unions. And for me, that is a massive, massive opportunity. Now you have to go beyond just talking about being a member of the community and being a neighbor, right? It's like, what do those things actually mean to the individual? But that's where getting personal and walking in their shoes is such an unlock, right? There was another study done, CU Collaborate, that basically says 75% of Americans have a positive view of credit unions, but only 25% actually bank with them. You bridge that gap by creating some resonance between the credit union and members or prospective members, or the upselling of those services over the lifetime of your relationship with them. And it's just a massively untapped insight to go, I get you. And that's not necessarily taking a risk. We're not about to be liquid death. If you think about the strange, wonderful marketing, right? You don't have to go to that length, but you better create some resonance or you're not going to get into someone's consideration set. And this is the crazy thing. And crazy is not the right frame. If you think about the brands in your mind, in your heart, that you consider from a credit union or a financial services space when you are looking for those products and services, it is a very small set to consider. Very
Mm.
small. There's a fallacy that there are a dozen. No, there's three or four, two or three, three or four, four or five. And what research would tell you is many in that consideration set are predetermined, right? The idea that you can somehow lodge your way into the consideration set if you're not already there is incredibly hard, near impossible. And I'm citing somewhat of it's a B2B piece of research, but it's anecdotally attributed across B2B and B2C audiences, which is from 6 Sense. And it's 80% of the brands in a consideration set are predetermined. So it's really hard. Now, the interesting thing is, how do you get there? To your very good point about brand, it's about creating strong and sustainable heuristics. Again, apologies for the academic part of this, but heuristic is simply shorthand. It's a shorthand memory association associated with your brand. And if you have a strong one, you are more likely to be in that consideration set to ultimately be chosen. But if people don't know who you are or why you exist or the true benefits of what you provide them, and that gets collapsed into a shorthand of a memory or association, you'll just never be considered. And that goes back to the beginning part of our conversation, which it's really hard to be considered when you are either ignored, not known, or you are the attributions and memories of your brand are the exact same as the other folks down the block or with Chase and Citi and Wells and Cap One, et cetera. So if you're not differentiated, you have a very small shot at being part of that consideration set because people don't remember you for anything.
Yeah, because the biggest brands, the most highly valued brands, the Apples, the Amazons, the Googles, whatever, they're fun, they're aspirational, they're like, and money can be that way.
Yeah.
Who doesn't aspire to something that costs money? So yeah, I think you're dead on about all of that. And you were talking a bit about what is missing in a lot of, not all, but a lot of credit unions branding and marketing. So why do you want to work with credit unions?
Oh my gosh. It is a massive passion of mine because you see the opportunity space, right? You see the white space. I'm a big fan of positioning and branding maps, right? And you chart them out, right? You have opposed axes and you chart a bunch out and you go, they're all talking about this. They're all talking about membership and parity products and services and rates. And they're all talking about the community, but in sort of amorphous ways. We're all talking about us, not them being the members. And you go from a market as a marketer, as a mad scientist, there's so much wonderful opportunity to help credit unions stand on their own and ultimately drive enterprise value creation. That to me is a wonderful calling as a practitioner. And then I also think to myself, and I'm going to go old man for a second. When Sarah, you and I think you're in South Carolina, but I'm in San Francisco, are on our rocking chairs in X number of years, having retired, right? And you look back on your career, you want to look back and go, those were 5 or 6 things, brands, opportunities, challenges that I helped build or fix or sustain. And the credit union space is this incredible opportunity to not play David versus Goliath, but really unlock a lot more of the enterprise value creation that isn't, because we've all taken this sort of safe sea of sameness road. It's a higher calling, but it's a rocking chair thing as well.
And yeah, that was yes. I kind of saved this question for second to last because I am so damn sick of talking about AI and all the different aspects. But in
Yeah.
particular, what is the role of AI in marketing? And some people have said it's going to be the death of the profession. What's your thought on that as well?
Oh my gosh, this is like a whole other this is a whole other
We have 2 minutes, dude.
conversation. I am a believer. I live in San Francisco, so I have to often pump the brakes on what's hyperbole and hysteria versus not, because AI is so fundamental to the economy and the people that I live next to and down the block and at the kids' baseball games, et cetera, right? So I gotta stop myself. I am a believer in that it can and should and is already automating a lot of the process, the buffer, the fluff out of marketing. Media planning is one of those things. Operationally is another one of those things. All net good. I would argue Also, the advent of synthetic research is also going to be a very good thing for us in the discipline. Conversely, there's, as we all know, it's all in the ether. There's a lot of slop and there's a lot of regression to the mean in terms of content. Again, we're going to and are creating content at warp light speed, and will continue to do that as AI, by the way, moves from written prompts to audio prompts, right? Your voice is much faster and much quicker and can express it, and the amount of content will just continue to proliferate at a speed that we probably don't want. Now, is that going to take entry level positions away? Sure. Is that going to take operational positions away? Yes, sure. What I think it changes, though, is what we're doing in marketing, which is we are less about the inputs and the widgets and the Henry Ford assembly line and or take it to an orchestra. We're less about the oboe and the drums and the clarinet and the flute and the violin, individuals living and working in a silo. And the marketing folks who are going to succeed, and I would say the marketing functions within credit unions and brands that are going to succeed are the ones that are going to become conductors. That are going to think and act in design and systems, not in widgets and specific advertising assets or one discipline within, e.g., media or just strategy or just creative or content creative. You're going to have to think critically to succeed. That's the reality of where we're at. Going back for a second, and I know we're way over time, as prospects and members in the credit union vertical think about the consideration set, AI is the default that's moving forward, right? It is replacing search. And there's a whole there's a whole other discussion about the layers involved in that and hallucination. And is it really playing back? Are the models playing back the things we want? It's a reality that we have to come to grips with. But I would push the brakes a little bit on the hysteria and the hyperbole around AI right now, but it is somewhat of a movable force. And I go back to your initial question of what would I tell my 20-year-old self? I mentor a lot of, I call them kids, but folks, kids coming out of college. And I'm like, oh, wow, you really want to make a 30-year career in advertising, marketing or advertising? It's a different world than when I grew up. But I would say two things. You better be a conductor and a master and a design and systems thinker with respect to AI. Go do that. And then two is you better become a subject matter expert in corporate finance because market, and this is a whole other conversation I'd love Sarah to have with you, is the divide between the marketing function and the C-suite and the CFO, because we historically have done a very poor job defining the impact that we have on enterprise value for a variety of reasons. But if you want to be the CMO, if you want to be the VP of a credit union and you want that facet of the organization to be treated incredibly seriously within, you got to know the fundamentals of corporate finance.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and I feel like not, in addition to that, marketing is also taking over what used to be a large chunk of sales role too.
Yeah.
So anyway, not going to get into the whole marketing sales debacle. But we do have a couple seconds left.
Yeah.
I always allow my guests to have the final thoughts. What would you like to leave our credit union executive audience with today?
Grasp the opportunity, like carpe diem, seize the day. I think trust in larger scale financial institutions is at a low. I think that will continue to be the case. And the opportunity is to really think about why you exist, what benefit that provides your members, walk in their shoes, like really map to your products and services to their life stages. But it isn't just about the mapping, it's about the intuitive understanding. You are them, right? You are going through those same life stages, presumably, and try and break free from the sea of sameness because the opportunity to do so far outweighs the risk of not doing so.
100%. Thanks so much for your time, Terry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah.